Good morning, everyone. So now we are going to study about the digestion in the stomach and intestines. Means how digestion occur, how the mechanical and chemical breakdown of the food particles in the stomach and intestine. So first we have to understand about the objective of this topic. So explain the gross morphology and structure and function of intestine. We must understood about the anatomy and physiology of the stomach and intestine both. In case if we are going to understand about the digestion process, how metabolism and digestion occur, identify the various types of the enzyme and juice that is involved in the digestion process. We have to identify them, and what is the process of HCl production. So these all will be the objectives. Now, learning outcomes will be like to understand about the function of intestine, chemical regulation of digestions, different digestive activity that occur in the stomach and intestines, how the food will passes from them, different digestive activity, and the secretion produced by the stomach. So these all be the learning outcomes. Now come to the point: mechanical and chemical digestion in the stomach. Several minutes after food entered the stomach, a gentle repairing peristaltic movement called the mixing wave passes over the stomach every 15 to 25 seconds. These waves macerate the food, mix it with the secretion of the gastric glands, and reduce it to a supply liquid called the soupy liquid called the chyme. Few mixing waves are observed in the fungus, which primarily has a storage function. As digestion proceeds in the stomach, more vigorous mixing waves begin at the body of the stomach and intensify as they reach the pylorus. The pyloric sphincter normally remain almost but not completely closed. So, how the digestion will help? How the wave, how the peristaltic movement will help in this process? As you can see here, the stomach have every 15 to 25 seconds that is the peristaltic movement, the rippling, crinkling will be there. So these type of the wave. So when the wall of the alimentary canal will having the peristaltic movement, so that means they mix the food, they macerate the foods. So this food will help to macerate and mix the food. To whom? With the gastric juice that will secreted by the different gastric glands. So when the gastric juice are mixed with this food, yeah, you can say when the secretion of the gastric is mixed with this food, it will form a soupy liquid. Okay, just it easy things. When the food is gonna to mixed with the some secretion, now it will be called the soupy liquid, that will be called the chyme. So when food goes into the stomach, in the stomach gastric juices is there, so food and gastric juices are combined to each other, mixed to each other, that will be called the chyme. Few mixing waves are observed in the fundus also, so it will helps to churning the foods. While stomach is act as a storage, as a reservoir for the food, it will also help in the these cases. Several times as the digestion going to proceed in the stomach, these mixing waves became strong and strong. Okay, so it will also intensify into the stomach and reaches to the pylorus. Now, if the pylorus, in the earlier classes, I explained about the pyloric antrum, pyloric canal, and then there is a pylorus sphincter will be there. So, if the pyloric sphincter is closed and sphincter is just on the neck of the, you can say, small intestine duodenum. Okay, so stomach and intestine. Between the stomach and intestine, there is a duodenum. Uh, that means the first part of the intestine, duodenum. So between the stomach and duodenum, there is a pyloric sphincter. This sphincter will act like a gate guard. If it is a closed, then the food will not allowed to pass from stomach to the intestine. And if this gate is open, that means the food can easily pass from the stomach to the intestine. So when a small amount of the food passes from the stomach to the intestine, after that this gate will be closed. So until that food is metabolized, digested and absorbed into the intestine, gate will not open. After digestion and after absorptions, gate will open, and again a small amount of the food will passes from the stomach to intestine again. Okay, so by this, slowly, the stomach is gonna to empty. So as food reaches the pylorus, each mixing wave periodically forces about the 3 ml of the chyme into the duodenum through the pyloric sphincter, a phenomenon known as the gastric emptying. Okay, that means gastric emptying. Gastric means we are talking about the stomach. Emptying means to make it blank, to make it empty. खाली कर देना. So in this case, how much time taken by the stomach to make themselves empty? Okay, how much time taken by the stomach that the chyme is passes into the duodenum through the pyloric sphincter. So this process is known as the gastric emptying. Most of the chyme is forced back into the body of the stomach where mixing continue, because you can understand when the food is going to pass from the stomach to the intestine, it will go to the uh, duodenum to the pyloric sphincter. Now sphincter is closed. Now food is again going to back into the body part of the stomach where the mixing is happening, where the churning is happening. So the next wave pushes the chyme forward again and forces a little more into the duodenum. So when the next wave will come, it will again forces the food into the duodenum. And after the small amount of going into the duodenum, again the pyloric sphincter will be closed and the remaining food will become into the stomach body. So these forward and backward movement of the gastric content are also responsible for mixing in the stomach. Okay, so you can understand when a food goes into the duodenum, and with that, a small amount of the food is come back into the body of the stomach. So this going and coming movement, that means backward and forward movement, will again help into the be mixed with. During this time, digestion by salivary amylase continue. Now, this is the time when digestions will be start by salivary amylases, and it will be goes to continue. Soon, however, the churning action mixes the chyme with the acidic gastric juice, inactivating salivary amylase and activating lingual lipase, which start to digest the triglyceride into the fatty acid and diglyceride. Now, this slide is the important things because it will going to tell you how it can be metabolized, how it can be going to break down of the certain food particles. Now, digestion by salivary amylases continue. So soon, however, the churning action mixes the chyme with acidic gastric juice, inactivating salivary amylases and activating the lingual lipase. Salivary amylase when is going to the into the stomach, now stomach having the acidic environment, so there the acidic gastric juices will be there, so it will causes the inactivating the salivary amylase and activating the lingual lipase. Now this will start to digest the triglyceride into the fatty acid and triglyceride. So there is a breakdown of the triglyceride product into the diglyceride and fatty acid. Although parietal cells secrete the hydrogen ions and chloride ions separately into the stomach, and it will causes the secretion of hydrochloric acid HCl. So HCl production is in the stomach. How is the production? Due to the parietal cell. Parietal will secrete the hydrogen ions separately and chloride ions separately in the lumens. So when the hydrogen and chloride in the lumen will gonna to combine, it will form the HCl. Proton pump powered by the hydrogen potassium ATPase actively transport hydrogen into the lumen while bringing potassium into the cell. At the same time, chloride and potassium diffuse out into the lumen through the chloride and potassium channel in the apical membrane. I will show you images through that I will explain these all things. There is another enzyme that is carbonic anhydrase and which is especially plentiful in parietal cell. Carbonic anhydrase is a much enough, plentiful, abundant in a parietal cell. Catalyze the formation of carbonic acid. So it will helping in the catalyzes the increase the reaction, increase the formation of the carbonic acid from water and carbon dioxide. So by the water and carbon dioxide, carbonic acid will form, H2CO3 will form, and due to the reason carbonic anhydrase enzyme. So carbonic anhydrase will present when the water and carbon dioxide, okay, so it will form the carbonic acid H2CO3. As carbonic acid dissociate, it provide a ready source for H plus ion proton pump, but also generate the bicarbonate ion. H2CO3, there is the carbonic acid is there. So when the H2CO3 is gonna to dissociate, the H plus ion will be separate and HCO3 ion will be separate. So HCO3 ions build up in the cytosol and it exits the parietal cell in exchange of the chloride via the antiporter. Which antiporter? Chloride and bicarbonate antiporter. Now in this case, we have to understand bicarbonate. Okay, carbonic acid dissociate into the H plus ion and the bicarbonate ions. Now this bicarbonate ion build up in the cytosol. Okay, and it will exit the parietal cell by in the exchange of the chloride with the help of the chloride and bicarbonate antiporter in the basolateral membrane. So bicarbonate diffuses into the near blood capillaries. This alkaline tide of bicarbonate ion entering the bloodstream after a meal may be large enough to elevate the blood pH slightly and make urine more alkaline. So this is the reason that will causes the blood pH slightly alkaline and make the urine is also alkaline. So the HCl secretion by the parietal cell can be stimulated by the several sources like the acetylcholine released by parasympathetic neurons, gastrin secretion by the G cell, histamine, which is a paracrine substance released by the mast cells in the nearby lamina propria. Acetylcholine and the gastrin stimulate the parietal cells to secrete more HCl in the presence of histamine. So it is also a reason that the gastrin is called the potent ulcer inducer because gastrin will stimulate the parietal cell to secrete the HCl. The strongly acidic fluid of the stomach kills many microbes in the foods. HCl partially denature the proteins in the food and stimulate the secretion of hormone that promote the flow of bile and pancreatic juice. Enzymatic digestion of protein also begin in the stomach. The only proteolytic enzyme in the stomach is a pepsin, which is secreted by the chief cell. Okay, so pepsin that is secreted by the chief cell, the pepsins severs certain peptides bond between the amino acids, break down the protein chain of many amino acids into the smaller peptide fragments. Pepsin is most effective in a very acidic environment of the stomach and it becomes inactive at a higher pH. What keeps pepsin from digesting the protein in the stomach cell along with the food? If there is a secretion of the pepsin by the chief cells, and pepsin will help to digest the proteins, denature the proteins. Okay, so if pepsin will help in the proteolytic enzyme denature of the protein, digesting the protein. So what keep the pepsin from digesting the protein in the stomach cell? First, pepsin is secreted in an inactive form that will be called the pepsinogen. So when it will be secreted, it cannot be digested the cell's own protein. Okay, because we know the pepsin is a protein digesting enzyme. So when the pepsin will be secreted by the chief cell, the cell having every cell having the protein. So that is can causes the digestion of the cell protein. So this is the reason pepsin is always secreted in active form, that will be called the pepsinogen. Okay. So it cannot digest the protein in the chip cells that produce it. Now, pepsinogen is not converted into the active pepsin until it comes in the contact with the hydrochloric acid secreted by parietal cell or active pepsin molecule. So when the pepsinogen come in the contact with the hydrochloric acid, okay. Now HCl is secreted by the parietal cell, H plus and Cl minus ion, okay. While pepsinogen is secreted by the chief cell. So when the pepsinogen is gonna to meet with this HCl, it will become the active pepsin molecules. Okay, now it will gonna to digest the proteins. Second, the stomach epithelial cell are protected from the gastric juice by 1 to 3 mm thick layer of the alkaline mucus secreted by surface mucus cell and mucous neck cell. We know in the stomach there is a gastric juice is there that contains the highly acidic environment is there. So how can stomach wall is protected by this acidic environment? If there is a acid in the stomach, so that means acid comes in the contact with the stomach wall. So how the stomach is still protected? So that due to the reason of the mucus secreted cells like the surface mucus cell and mucous neck cell. So another enzyme of the stomach is a gastric lipase, which split the short chain triglyceride in fat molecules into fatty acid and the monoglyceride. A monoglyceride consists of a glycerol molecules that is attached to one fatty acid molecules. This enzyme, which has a limited role in the adult stomach, operate best at a pH of 5 to 6. More important than either lingual lipase or gastric lipase is a pancreatic lipase, an enzyme secreted by the pancreas into the small intestine. Only a small amount of nutrients are absorbed in the stomach because it is epithelial cells are impermeable to most material. So digestion will be occurred in the stomach. It is correct, but stomach cannot be absorbed the all nutrients. So only a small amount of the nutrients can be absorbed through the stomach because it has the impermeable membranes. Epithelial cells are impermeable for the most of the material, so it cannot be absorbed. However, mucous cell of the stomach absorbs some water, ions, short chain fatty acid, as well as the certain drugs and alcohol. Within 2 to 4 hours after eating a meal, the stomach has emptied its content into the duodenum. So stomach will take 2 to 4 hours until the empty, and where it will be empty the food contains, it will empty into the small intestine duodenum parts, and it will take how much time? 2 to 4 hours. So food rich in carbohydrate spend the last and spend the least time in the stomach. Those foods which are rich in the carbohydrate that spend the minimum time in the stomach. High protein food remain the somewhat longer. Those foods who have the large number of the proteins in the foods will remains in the stomach for a long time, and emptying is a slower after a fat laden meal containing the large amount of triglyceride. So now these are the images. You can see how the HCl will produced. secretion of HCl, hydrochloric acid, by the parietal cell in the stomach. You can see there is a yellow color is the chyme in the stomach lumen, pink that will be parietal cells, and blue that is the interstitial fluids and the blood capillaries is there, the lamina propria. You can see the pink color that is a parietal cell structure. These parietal cells will contains the water and carbon dioxide, H2O plus CO2. You can see the reaction is mentioned H2O and CO2. So H2O and CO2 in the presence of carbonic anhydrase enzyme, as I told you in the earlier slides. Carbonic anhydrase enzyme will catalyzes the reaction of H2O and water and form the carbonic acid, H2CO3. This carbonic acid will dissociate into the H plus ion and HCO3 minus ion, bicarbonate ion. This bicarbonate HCO3 ions will goes into the interstitial fluid, okay, and goes into the bloodstream and make the blood alkaline. Similarly, it will goes into the interstitial intestines when the chloride alumin comes with the help of the chloride and bicarbonate antiporter. Okay, so here is a chloride and bicarbonate antiporter is there. So bicarbonate will be goes into the interstitial fluids through the basolateral membrane, and chloride will ion will comes in the parietal cell, and then through the apical membrane it will also leave the parietal cell and goes into the lumen with the help of the chloride channel. So by this process, the H2O plus CO2 in the presence of carbonic anhydrase enzymes, this process will be happened. Now H plus ion is again going into the lumen with the help of the proton pump. That will be the hydrogen potassium ATPase pump. So by using the hydrogen potassium ATPase pump, hydrogen is in the lumen and chloride is also in the lumen. So this H plus ion and Cl minus ion will meet in this case and form the hydrochloric acid. HCl will be produced. So this process is continued. Now you have to understand, when we want to reduce the gastric acid secretion or when we want to inhibit the production of the HCl, what can we do? We just inhibit this process. Either chloride cannot be reaches into the lumen, or either H plus ion cannot be reaches into the lumen. So there is a no combining of the H plus ion and Cl ion. So HCl will not produce. So we can inhibit the proton pump. If proton pump is the that pump that is acting by, you can say, producing the H plus ion, okay, into the lumen. So proton pump, hydrogen potassium ATPase pump, if we block the hydrogen potassium ATPase pump, what will happen? H plus ion will not goes into the lumen. So if the H plus ion will not goes into the lumen, then HCl will not produce. So it will happen in the cases of the peptic ulcer disease. So in the peptic ulcer disease person, the doctor prescribe the medicine proton pump inhibitor like the omeprazole, pantoprazole, rameprazole. So these are the drugs that is comes and bind with the proton pump and inhibit their action. So if the proton pump is not working, so HCl will be not produced. Now these are the several number of the cells, like the chief cell secrete the pepsinogen, and pepsin, the activated form, break down the protein into the peptides. Secrete the gastric lipase, split the triglyceride into the fatty acid and monoglyceride. Parietal cell will be there, that will be secreted the hydrochloric acid and kill the microbes in the food, denature the proteins, convert pepsinogen into the pepsin. Secrete the intrinsic factor is there. Now intrinsic factor is important for the absorption of the vitamin B12, which is used in the erythropoiesis, that is the red blood cell formation. So parietal cell having the brilliant function. It will also helping in the secretion of the hydrochloric acid that will kill the microbes in the foods, denature the proteins, convert the pepsinogen into pepsin, inactive to active form. So these are the function of the hydrochloric acid. Simultaneously, it will secrete the intrinsic factor. It will be helping in the vitamin B12 absorption. Third one is the surface mucous cells and the mucous neck cell. So secrete the mucus. It will help to secrete the mucus that will form a protective barrier that prevent the digestion of the stomach wall. If the stomach wall is not covered with this mucus, then acid will directly come in the contact of the stomach wall and the wall is going to digest it. Wall is going to break down, rupture. So it will causes the ulcer. So this can be protected by this mucus. So mucus make a protective layer surrounding the stomach wall. Absorption is there. The small quantity of water, iron, salts, and fatty acid, and some drugs enter the bloodstream. G cell is there. G cell will secrete the gastrin. It will stimulate the parietal cells to secrete the HCl and chief cell. Now, G cell will causes the stimulation of the parietal cells to secrete the HCl and the chief cell to secrete the pepsinogen, contract lower esophageal sphincter, increases the motility of the stomach and relax the pyloric sphincter. Mascularies is there that will be helping in the mixing the waves. Macerate the food and mix it with gastric juice, forming the chyme. Now, G cell and mascularies, they are the different things, but there sometimes you can see the similar things. G cell is going to stimulate the parietal cell to secrete the HCl, and chief cell to secrete the pepsinogens that will contain the lower esophageal sphincter, increase the motility of the stomach, relax the pyloric sphincter, while mascularies will help into the mixing the food, macerate the foods with the gastric juice, forming the chyme. Peristalsis is also by the mascularies. So this peristalsis will forces the chyme through the pyloric sphincters and it will goes into the duodenum. Pyloric sphincters, the open to permit the passes to the chyme into the duodenum, regulate the passes of the chyme from the stomach to the duodenum, prevent the backflow of chyme from the duodenum to the stomach. Now there is a small intestine. Most digestion and absorption of nutrients occur in a long tube called the small intestine. Because of this, its structure is specially adapted for these functions. So the digestion, most of the digestion and absorptions of the foods, of the nutrients are occur in this small intestines. Its length alone provides a large surface area for the digestion and absorptions, and that area is further increased by the circular folds, villi, and that will call the villi and microvilli. The small intestines begin at the pyloric sphincter of the stomach, coils through the central and inferior parts of the abdominal cavity, and eventually open into the large intestine. You will see there is a duodenum, jejunum, and ileum. Then goes for the large intestines. It averages about 2.5 centimeter in a diameter. Its length about 3 meter in a living person and about 6.5 in a cadaver due to the loss of smooth muscle tone after the death. The small intestine is divided into three regions. The duodenum, the shortest region, is a retroperitoneal. It starts at the pyloric sphincter of the stomach and extend about 25 centimeter until it merges with the jejunum. Duodenum means 12. So it is so named because it is about the long as the width of the 12 finger. So it will call the duodenum. The jejunum is about 1 meter, 3 feet long and extend to the ileum. Jejunum means empty, which is how it is found at death. The final and the longest region of the small intestine is the ileum, that is the twisted form. So measures about 2 meters, 6 feet, and joins the large intestine at the smooth muscle sphincter that will be called the ileocecal sphincter. So ileocecal sphincters are the area where the large intestine and small intestine will be connected. The wall of the small intestine is composed of the same four layers that make up the most of the GI tract. We studied in the last classes mucosa, submucosa, muscularies, and serosa. Same for in the all alimentary canal. So yes, in the intestine it is these four layers. So the mucosa is composed of a layer of the epithelium, lamina propria, and muscularis mucosa. The epithelium layer of the small intestine mucosa consists of the simple columnar epithelium that contains many types of the cells. Absorptive cell of the epithelium digest and absorb the nutrient in a small intestine kind. Also present in the epithelium are the goblet cells, which are secrete mucus. The small intestine mucosa contains many deep crevices lined with the glandular epithelium. The cells lining the crevices from the intestinal glands, that is known as the crypt of the lubricants, and secrete the intestinal juice. Beside absorptive cells and the goblet cell, the intestinal glands also contain the pineal cells and enteroendocrine cells. Now, the pineal cell will help in the secretion of the lysozyme, a bacterial enzyme that is capable for phagocytosis. So, pineal cell may have a role in regulating the microbial population in the small intestine. So, when there is a microbial population will be developed in the small intestine, this pineal cell will regulate, control, and eradicate them. So, three type of, and second is the enteroendocrine cells. So, three type of the enteroendocrine cells are found in the intestinal glands of the small intestine: S cell, CCK cell, and K cell. So these which secrete the hormones secretin, cholecystokinin, or you can say the CCK, and glucose dependent insulinotropic peptide or GIP is the respectively secreted. The lamina propria of the small intestine mucosa contains the areolar connective tissue and has abundance of the mold. The solitary lymphatic nodules are the most numerous in the distal part of the ileum. Groups of the lymphatic nodules, referred to as aggregated lymphatic follicles, are also present in the ileum. The muscularis mucosa of the small intestine mucosa consists of the smooth muscles. Now, the role of intestines we will discuss in the later classes. What is the role of the intestines? We will start from the next classes. Before that, we are having some quiz for you, so you can see, you can understand these quizzes. First question is, from which of the gut structure below is most digested food absorbed? Duodenum, stomach, ileum, and ascending colon. Duodenum is a small intestine part. Stomach is there. Ileum is again duodenum and ileum, small intestine part, and ascending colon. So the most food digested from the gut structure is the ileum. Which hormone stimulate the release of bile and pancreatic juice? Cholecystokinin, secretin, intestinal gastrin, pepsin. So yes, cholecystokinin, CCK is there. Which just I mentioned earlier, CCK stimulate the release of bile and pancreatic juice. Which of the following gut structure are listed in the corrected order that food would pass through them from input to exit? Which of the following gut structure are listed in the correct order that food would pass through them? Now there is a four option is there, and these option is the just jumblings. Now you have to make the correct order, because these order are the shuffle here. Okay, so you have to make the correct. First, pyloric sphincter, the food first come in the pyloric sphincter, then goes to ileum, then goes to jejunum, then goes to transverse column. Or food first comes in the pancreas, then goes to jejunum, ascending column, then sigmoid column. Yeah, food come from the ileum to duodenum to ascending column to ascending column. A food first come the duodenum, then ileum, then cecum, then transverse column. So you have to choose the which one is the correct order. First, A option is the pyloric sphincter. Okay, food comes from the pyloric sphincter, then it will goes to the ileum. No, before ileum, the food comes into the duodenum. So this A is incorrect. Second, pancreas. Food ever goes into the pancreas? No, food goes into the stomach, then intestine, then duodenum to the intestine. There's a no food comes in the pancreas. Pancreas is a accessory digestive organs that will secrete the pancreatic juice into the duodenum for helping in the digestion. So B is again incorrect. C, ileum. Okay, food comes into the ileum, small intestine. Then from ileum, food can go to the duodenum. No, it's incorrect. Duodenum comes first before the ileum. So when the food will come in the duodenum, then it will can goes into the ileum. But food cannot go to reverse because ileum is further from the duodenum. So yes, C is incorrect again. Now we have the answer number D. Food comes in the duodenum. Okay. From the stomach, food comes into the duodenum. Okay. Then from duodenum, food goes into the ileum. Okay, it is also correct. Then duodenum is jejunum and ileum. So yes, from duodenum it can goes into the ileum. Then from ileum it can goes into the cecum. Okay, it is also correct because cecum is a large intestine part. So yes, cecum is okay. From cecum it goes to the transverse colon. Now in the large intestine, you will see there is a cecum, colon, and rectum. First comes cecum, then column. Column having the ascending column, transverse column, and descending column. Then rectum. So yes, obviously from cecum it will goes into the colon. So it's a transverse colon. So yes, answer D is correct. Now, which statement about the layer of the alimentary canal is correct? Now, we focus. Which statement? There are the following four statements as there, and you have to make the correct, choose the correct statement about the layer of alimentary canal. First, the serosa absorb the product of digestion. Serosa absorb the product of digestion. B. Mucosa protect against self-digestion. C. The submucosa is involved in segmentation and peristalsis. D. The muscularies is externa stains connective tissue. So in these all four things, the B is correct. The mucosa protect against the self-digestion. Next question will be there. Which of the following pair of substance are not secreted by the stomach as a part of the gastric juice? Which of the following pairs, now there's listed the four pairs, four name of the gastric secretions. So which one of the following pair of substance are not secreted by the stomach? So that is not secreted by the stomach as a part of the gastric juice. First, hydrochloric acid and pepsinogen. I think both are secreted into the stomach. Hydrochloric acid is secreted by the parietal cell, as well as pepsinogen will secreted by the chief cell, and these all cell will present in the stomach. So stomach secreted these things, and these are the part of the gastric juice. So obviously A is incorrect. Hormone and intrinsic factor is there. It is also incorrect. Why? Intrinsic factor that will helping in the absorption of the vitamin B12 is needed, also secreted by the parietal cell. Parietal cell will secrete the HCl and intrinsic factor. So yes, it's incorrect. Hormone is there. Gastrin G cell is secreted to some hormones. The stomach is again secreted this B point. Now C is the nuclease and amylase, and D is the mucus and gastrin. Mucus is secreted by the mucus and mucous neck cell. Gastrin is secreted by the G cell. So A, B, C, A, B, and D, these three cannot be the correct answer. So which one is the correct that is not secreted by the stomach? The nuclease and amylase. Nuclease and amylase cannot secreted by the stomach as a part of the gastric juice. So yes, answer C is correct. Now, last question. From which of the gut structure below is most digested food absorbed? From which of the gut structure below is most digested food absorbed? So there are the several name of the gut structure like the duodenum, stomach, ileum, and ascending colon. Now we have to choose one correct. Duodenum is there. Duodenum is the area from where the stomach will pass the food into the intestine. The first comes at the duodenum, and duodenum is the area where the most of the enzyme and juices are secreted through the pancreas, and the bile is also secreted at the duodenum. So it will help to make them the soupy, all soupy again, and helping in the digestion. But the question is, most digested food absorbed in which area? C. B is the stomach, is act as a reservoir, mixing the food with the gastric juices, make a kind. See, ileum is there, duodenum, jejunum, ileum. Ileum is again part of the small intestine, and the maximum absorption is happened in the ileum. So yes, ileum is correct answer. D. D is the ascending colon. Ascending colon is a part of the large intestine. It will also helping into the digestion. But you can see the water is the most often reabsorbed from this area as compared to food. So yes, C is the correct answer. Now you have to go through the some reference book after I explained about the intestinal chemical digestions. You have to read these things about the book. So there are the list of the books that will help you to go in the deep about the digestions. Tartora Gerard and Directions Brian books that will the Principal Anatomy and Physiology. It's a brilliant and excellent book of the human anatomy and physiology. Second books of the Bill Melinda and Anatomy and Physiology. And third one is the Robbins and Cotron. Robin and Cotron books is not for the anatomy and physiology, it's for the pathological basis of disease. Why I mention these books? Because when you will study about the digestive system, when you study about the every part, every organ involved in the digestion, you will know digestion is digestive system is the most important. If digestive system is gonna to malfunction or abnormalities is there, there is the disease will develop. There are the lots of the disease will develop due to the digestion. So it will causes the how the disease will develop, what is the pathology of the that disease. It can be easily understand and it all discussed in the Robinson Cotron. For example, peptic ulcer is there, gastritis is there. So if the peptic ulcer is gonna to produced due to the abnormality in the digestive system, because HCl is going to more secreted and mucus layer is eradicated. So if the mucus layer is going to eradicate it from the stomach wall and the more HCl is going to secrete by the parietal cell, then what will happen? The peptic ulcer will produced. Now if the peptic ulcer will produced, it can be peptic ulcer, it can be duodenal ulcer. Okay, so this will causes the disease. Then you can understand what is the pathology, what is the pathophysiology, what is the pathogenesis of this disease. Let me give a basic examples. That is not a disease, but you can sense it. There is another sphincter except the pyloric sphincter that will be known as the esophageal sphincter that will present in your esophagus. So at your stomach upper part, cardia, there is a sphincter, esophageal sphincter. When this sphincter will be open, you will feel the burning sensation due to the regurgitation. That means the food of the stomach is comes into your esophagus. After eating, when the food goes into the stomach, because there is a sphincter at the end of the esophagus and the starting of the stomach, so with that sphincter will be opened, food goes into the stomach. So in the stomach, the acid is mixed with the foods and make it a kind. But due to some mishaps, if the sphincter of the esophageal sphincter is remain open, what will happen? Food with the gastric juice which goes back into the your esophagus. Then what will happen? You will feel the burning sensation in your esophagus. You will feel the chest, also the chest burning sensation will be there. So this will only due to the opening of the esophageal sphincter. And if the sphincter is closed, most often it will be closed. So what will happen? If the sphincter will be closed, then it will be goes easily to the stomach. Okay. So when the churning, during the churning, when the food will be gonna to bubble it, gonna to jump it, so esophageal sphincter is closed, so there will be no problem. The food cannot be comes into the esophagus, and you cannot feel the sensation of the burning sensation. Okay, the burning of the esophageal, you cannot feel it. So that is the one thing. Gastritis is there. Gastritis, I explained earlier that this is the causes the inflammation. This means the inflammation. Gastritis means gastric inflammation. Now gastric inflammation can be caused by the several ways, either by there is a some abnormalities of the cell, either by some bacterial infection in the gastric parts, the stomach. So when there is an inflammation in the gastric, that will be called the gastritis. Okay. Similarly, you can see like the diabetes. Diabetes is a group of the metabolic disorder. Okay. So when our digestive system is gonna to not properly work, then diabetes can also be possible, because if the digestion is not properly happen, glucose maybe can be high in the blood or maybe can be low in the blood. So it can be hyperglycemia, it can be hypoglycemia. So it's another factor. So Robin and Cotton will help you to understand about the pathophysiology of the these disease and every things. Not only the digestive system, every system having correlate with some disease. Like your urinary system is there, urinary system will also having several disease, like glomerulonephritis is there. Okay, so it will also mention here. So go through the Robinson Cotton, also read the pathophysiology of the these disease. Till then, thank you. We will meet again in the next class. So thank you so much.